The trade show wake-up call for automation marketers. Let's face it, most trade shows underperform, and it's not because the shows are bad. It's because the strategy is broken. Too many marketers still treat events like it's 2015. 10% prep, 80% booth time, and maybe 10% show follow-up. Then they wonder why the pipeline stalls, the meetings go nowhere, and the execs start questioning the spend. This is your no BS reset. Hi, I'm Ralph Henderson. I'm your host for the Global Supply Chain Marketing Group. The Global Supply Chain Marketing Group is a professional development webinar series for supply chain marketing professionals. We want to educate and develop you so that you can be more impactful and get a greater return on all of your efforts, and therefore you win, your company wins, and the industry wins. So welcome for being here, and thank you for taking the time. You are going to not be disappointed with today's topic, I promise you. Before we get to that, though, I want to let you know you can ask questions. So feel free to put questions in the Q&A area, and we will certainly get to those, time permitting. The other thing is I wanted to tell you what we're going to talk about today. We're going to unpack an uncomfortable truth. Most supply chain and automation marketers know they should invest more in pre-show planning and post-show engagement, but they don't. Whether it's a lack of experience, unclear handoffs, disjointed sales alignment, or just falling into lazy habits, the result is the same: missed revenue. You're going to learn how flipping your event strategy to 40, 20, 40 pre, during, post is going to change the game. We're going to dive into the biggest mindset shift that transformed our event ROI. Why post-show is not follow-up, it's the main event. How to align your BDRs, your AEs, your execs before the show starts. What's working now to pre-book meetings that actually convert. The trade show mistake too many marketers make is still the make and how to fix it. If your goal is closed won revenue, not just photos of packed booths, this session is for you. So it's time to stop just doing shows and start building a pipeline that performs. So you're going to hear from Kaylin Radcliffe, who is the Vice President of the Global Marketing and Revenue Operations at Berkshire Grey. They're a leading in the AI-powered robotic automation industry for supply chain operations. With over 15 years of experience in B2B, Kaylin drives growth through strategic brand positioning, account-based marketing, and content that connects innovation to customer value. At Berkshire Grey, she leads a global marketing and revenue operation that has initiatives that help the world's largest retailers and logistics providers modernize fulfillment with robotics. Welcome, Kayla.
Thank you.
My pleasure. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you for a brief presentation for our audience, and then we'll come together for a panel discussion. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks, Kaylin.
All right, so let's start with being honest with ourselves. For most marketing teams, the majority of our spend for the year, our budget, is events. But we often are left scratching our heads with, why aren't we getting any of that back in terms of pipeline and orders? In most cases, it's because of the lack of focus on the end goal. When you actually look at how those badge scans and fuzzy pipeline attribution convert, they often don't. And unfortunately, we've accepted this as the cost of doing business for too long, and it's time for a reset. So as Ralph mentioned, the current model of 10-80-10 isn't working for you. That's 10% planning, 80% at the show itself, and 10% post-show. It's It's backloaded, it's reactive, and it relies on hope. Hope that foot traffic shows up to your booth, hope that you connect with the right people, but hope isn't a business strategy. The structure sets you up to miss real pipeline opportunities and capitalize on your spend. The 40-20-40 reset is simple but powerful. 40% of your efforts are spent pre-planning before the show. 20% of your focus is actually during the show, and another 40% post-show follow-through. This is how you shift from making noise to making money. It's a framework that creates real outcomes, meetings, qualified pipeline, and what we all want, which is close-won deals. So let's start at the top, alignment. This is not just booth graphics. It's about connecting your show to your broader go-to-market strategy. The show itself should feel like a chapter in your story, not a one-off stunt. Everyone, marketing, sales, execs, everyone at your company should know, why are we going and who do we want to meet? What is the message that we want to deliver at the show? Next, invite. Shift your goal. Your goal shouldn't be badge scans. It should be pre-booked meetings with accounts that can convert. Partner with sales to generate lists, to create spiffs that incentivize the team to draw out qualified meetings. Here, really what you're thinking about is quality, not quantity. Meeting. Again, success at your booth isn't foot traffic. It's quality meetings with buyers in your ICP that include decision makers from both your side and the prospect side. You should have agendas ready. You should be focusing on their real problems with your real solutions and tangible next steps. That leads us to qualification. If someone walks into your booth, you should have a clear answer of what's next. Don't settle for, we had a great chat. Aim for things that are tangible. Are you going on a site tour? Are they giving you SKUs so you can do a SKU analysis? Is it that you're driving them to a demo? Is it an exec meeting? Move the conversation down the funnel, not into the abyss, which brings us to close. We're going to this event to drive pipeline that converts. So your metric, again, isn't badge scans or influenced pipeline. It's how many meetings converted to opportunities. It's how many of those opportunities are now closed won. This isn't just marketing, it's selling. This brings us to how you should think about trade shows and events holistically. Your trade show in itself isn't a strategy, it's a channel. It needs to be tied to your broader campaigns, content, and your messaging arc. If it's not contributing to the same North Star as the rest of your marketing efforts, it's a distraction. Start your trade show discussion by linking it back to what message you want to deliver to the market. How does your booth, your digital marketing, your email marketing, your sales outreach, your post-show follow-up, how does all of that contribute? Stop thinking about events as a standalone message or moment, but rather a way for you to build on your momentum and amplify your message. Winning at shows starts months before the event. So again, we talked about this, but we really need early executive alignment on the message and the goals. You need the entire team to be bought in, both in terms of the messaging and the list, but also think things like incentives and compensation with their key metrics for the show for what success is for you. Then it needs to be a hand-in-hand initiative between sales, marketing, and, to be honest, the rest of the organization. How do we target the companies that we want to meet at the show? Then it's about visibility. The whole company should have awareness as to what you want to do and how you're tracking. Get everyone in the company involved. I like to share it at our company all-hands meetings, which we have on Monday. And then think of a regular cadence, whether it's in Slack or email or another system you use, to make sure that everyone has real-time visibility to the success of your event. If you're planning the show at the airport gate, you've already lost. By the time you show up, your meeting room should be completely booked. Your NDA should be signed. Your talking points should be aligned. You are at the show to execute, not to wing it. I know it's a hard truth and a hard pill to swallow, but a crowded booth doesn't pay the bills. What matters is how many meaningful conversations you can have with people capable of buying what you're selling. Who sat down with you and shared their pain points? What is the follow-up and the next steps? Driving every meeting to a tangible and meaningful next step for your business is the only conversion that counts. Post-show. Most companies treat post-show as the wrap-up. We treat it as a second campaign launch. Your leads are fresh, your buyers are open, you should have clear next steps, which we've talked about, and understand for every account that you have a meeting booked with, what is next that makes sense for them and offers them value. Are they higher in the funnel? So do you have a customer reference that you can offer them or a case study? Even things like driving your leads to an upcoming webinar that you have is a piece of value that you can offer them that drives them further in that buying cycle. You have a reason to reach out, use it. Don't lose that momentum. Closing. The real reason that you're going to shows. If the show doesn't help you generate new customers or expansion, why did you go? You should start your show planning with forecasting what you want to do. Forecast based on the meetings that you want to happen. Track pipeline created from the show. Track increase in deal velocity from the meetings. Track conversion through to close one. I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give marketers looking at shows is know your ROI, know your average deal size, know what your customers look like, and understand what is the one orders at the end of the day in terms of dollars. And that should always be relative to what you're spending on the show. You should go into the show with a clear picture of what your expected return on your investment is, so that at the end of the show, you can understand, was it a good use of my time and money? You're not just a marketer here, you're a vital part of the revenue team. And with that, I will pass it back to Ralph.
Excellent. Man, if you wanted a step-by-step instruction on how to do a successful show, you're done. You can go. That was great. We have some great questions. Before we get into this, I want to thank Supply Chain Brain Media for sponsoring today. They are really the behemoth behind all of this that has decided they want to help the industry. And for that, I applaud them for their philanthropy. Thank you for that. The other thing I want to say is, look, we're not speaking from a pedestal. For anybody that's watching or listening to this, I mean, I promise you, Kaylin and I have probably sadly been through things that have gone wrong more often than anybody would want to go through. So just know this comes from our heart in a sincere, we want you to do it well kind of way. I mean, Kaylin, like you saw, 15 years with business to business. I've been in the supply chain space doing trade shows since 1991. So I remember, and the first question actually comes from this. I remember when we only had salespeople at the show, right? I mean, I remember when that's what the show was. We were closing deals, and these were deals in the material handling industry long before all of this tech and software and what have you. And so I think what's happened is we've evolved from there, and we've gone from that, hey, let's do deals on the floor, to let's get somebody to make us look pretty at the show, to now it's almost like I hesitate to use the word boondoggle, but it's almost like a, hey, let's just go have some drinks and have some fun and build some relationships. And I like, Kaylin, that you're getting back to the basics of let's talk about making money from the show. So the first question I have for you is let's talk about the rise of the event planner at shows. So has the ownership of shows shifted too far from the pipeline-minded marketers?
Yes. So not that I am anti-events marketer, but it's the orientation. So I think we just need to make sure that everyone at the show is an extension of sales, like you said, versus an extension of marketing. And I just feel like we've swung too far in the everyone at this show floor, salesperson or not, becomes a marketer. And then the whole orientation of the show is towards marketing or event type metrics versus sales metrics of pipeline and revenue.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And again, folks, please know we're doing this because we want to help you to see that vision, to have that ability, as we go into trade show seasons, and we have a couple of those in the materials handling and the supply chain space throughout the year. We want this to kind of be your mindset going into that. So, second question is, so why is it so important to consider every pillar online, earned media, branding, lead gen, and content when you're executing a successful show?
Yeah, I think just like I mentioned, trade shows aren't a moment, they're a channel. So I think of the whole show and everything that you have to leverage in terms of, the different marketing channels available to you. And think of online as the way to generate interest for those meetings, earned as a way to get credibility, content as a way to, support that conversion and bring people further down the funnel. Brand reinforces your trust, and then obviously lead gen is what's, the follow up, the funnel conversion, and the wins. You need it all.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And in honor of all of those things, for those of you who want to remember that, just keep watching the little scrolling rings because we believe that too, right? If you think about a successful trade show, you're looking at the right brain of, the branding, the online stuff, the left brain of the content development, the earned media, but they all come together for this lead generation. And that's why it's so important with what you as the supply chain marketing professional is doing. So the third question is, are we honest with ourselves about the amount of work a good show actually takes?
My guess is no. I mean, even if I go back thinking about, did I know how much work a trade show was before I executed one? And, even having done the number of shows that I've done now, I think I still don't know. Or maybe I just choose to forget. But trade shows to me are at least a 12-month endeavor. And what that
Mhm.
means is you're planning your next show when you're standing on the floor of the show before it. So if this is, a month or two or even 3-month exercise right before the show, that's not even enough time for you to execute a great show.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, and no one empathizes with the supply chain marketing professional more than I do on how hard that is and how difficult. And we're going to get to why that might be as it relates to buy-in from the execs or connection with sales. So please know, folks, we know sometimes you are at a disadvantage of trying to get some influence done within the organization. So the next question is the reason most shows underdeliver simply because most marketers are still too tactical and maybe not strategic?
Yeah, and I think that a little bit bleeds into the question before
Mm.
because trade shows are so much work that sometimes we do get bogged down in the tactics. So I think it's just remembering the whole strategy and what you're executing against versus maybe getting too bogged down in the details and, failing to level up.
Yeah, and I know this is a way overused metaphor, but you got to think of it almost like the long game of physical fitness, right? I
Yeah.
mean, How many times have you heard, and I'm sure everybody has, where everybody tries to get in shape right before the summer to get their
Yep.
summer bod, or they
Yep.
try to get in shape right after the new year because of the resolution. And, look, I know it's overused, but the reason it's overused is because it's true. And so I think we need to feel the same way about trade shows is maybe what we do is we take one show, big show, one we can do a lot of business with, and do a pilot of what Kaylin's talking about here with this 12-month step by step that she gave you earlier in the presentation, and just see how it goes. And look, we would love to hear from you. We would love to know what worked, what didn't work, what was challenging. So please let us know. We also want to create some sort of a communication cohort, if you will, in helping one another, support one another, encourage one another. So please know that. And then also, please ask questions today if you want. I mean, if you have some specific questions and you want to know something right now, we're happy to take those. And if we can't get to them live today, we will certainly get back to you as soon as possible.
So one of the
Next
best
question.
parts
Go
about
ahead.
this kind of community that we're in is how much of a community it is. So it's great. Always great to connect with people and learn from others. So for sure,
No,
reach
that's
out.
exactly right. I mean, at the end of the day, we're better together. I mean,
Yep.
again, overused but true. Okay, so the next question is, do companies still see shows as marketing instead of selling? And what does that cost them?
Yeah, so I think same message that we've been sharing is that while you are marketing, and obviously you're putting your brand out there, you're creating buzz, but I think those are the result and not always the goal. So I think we just need to make sure that we're clear going in with what are our sales goals, and for sure your marketing around that. That's part of how you get to that goal, but it isn't the goal. So I think it's just remembering, again, reorienting ourselves to the outcomes of pipeline and revenue.
Right. Yeah, and again, a lot of my friends tease me because I have all these euphemisms and metaphors and all that stuff. And look, I can't help it, right? So what Kaylin's talking about is part of what you're doing is trying to heat the ocean, throw the net over the entire sea. And that's great. You need to do that, whether the show has 2,500 people or 45,000 people. You want to do what you can to get your name out there. But at the end of the day, heating the ocean just makes the fish comfortable. You don't necessarily eat. So the second part of what you're doing is the spearing the fish. That means you got to know what fish you're going after. That means you got to know, exactly how to do that. Look, the rest of the fish in the ocean aren't going to get affected. That one fish is the one who's going to, but at least you're going to eat. So kind of think of it that way, where you have this two-pronged, I've got to get my brand out there, but I've also got to catch the fish so I can get business as a
Yep.
result. All right. So if your booth doesn't tell a clear story that fits into your year-long go-to market campaign, what exactly are you showing?
You are distracting the market. If your story tells either not the story that you set out to with your marketing strategy for the year, or even worse, a different story, imagine what that experience is like for someone showing up at your booth that's either already engaged with sales and comes in with an expectation, or someone that's interacting with you earlier in the funnel. And now this is their perception of who you are and the message that they're going to take away from the show. So, we talked about it being a part of how you represent your brand and your strategy, but I think of it more like a billboard for the year of the message that you already are delivering and have set out to kind of tell the market and describe your company and products with.
So here's a add-on question to that. It seems to me again in the decades that I've been doing this that the B2C folks have figured this out to a degree, right? They
Yep.
get a message. They create a mantra, they create a tagline, and then they just pound that puppy home. And I know there's a lot of people watching and listening to this that don't know the time before we had emus and geckos and other characters representing aftermarket insurance companies. But believe it or not, there was a time. It was a very rigid, a very kind of anal industry. It wasn't until somebody broke through, and that somebody would be the duck people, right? They were the first ones who created a character that we all now relate to that company. So the add-on question to here is they figured it out decades ago. They're using it. It's benefiting them. So what would you say to those folks who maybe are coming up with those creative, innovative ideas that are akin to the duck for this
Yeah.
industry?
I would say 100% lean into it. The
Okay.
more memorable that you can be, the better. Obviously, we are in a space that doesn't lend itself to that yet, but just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean it shouldn't happen. So I think of how you stand out, how you create a memory because people buy solutions, not companies.
No, wow, that could not have been said better. And that's something we need to take near and dear to our heart. So here's a tough question. So if and when a show flops, who's accountable? And do we even have the right owner in the room?
So I think if you followed the playbook and you got everyone bought in and aligned early, if the show flops, everyone is accountable. It isn't squarely seated on some poor marketing person's desk. Everyone was bought in, everyone signed off on the goals, everyone worked together to execute on those goals. So if they didn't, we should always be doing, I think first, full stop, always be doing a post-show retro with everyone involved. Open the book, what worked, what didn't. And if it didn't work, be ready to learn from it and do something different for your next show. But don't just sit in a corner as marketing and be like, the show was a flop. That's on us. It's shared accountability.
No doubt about it. And let me give the audience some nuggets of wisdom. So post shows are can be overwhelming. They can feel like a lot. So what most people who maybe haven't done this with any sort of structure think about is, hey, let's talk about the show. And then they just get peppered with stuff all over the show, whether it's pre-show, logistics, branding, the booth, the party we had or whatever. That's hard because you're trying to manage that. What I would argue, pragmatically and objectively, is to cut the show up into its different pieces. So if you have a post show, let's talk about the booth, let's talk about pre-show, let's talk about logistics, but put them in the different categories. Your folks will love this because in the materials handling and the supply chain space, we like doing things in compartments.
Yep.
So if you will decide as the professional, what compartments do I want to have a post show on? That will help you A, manage that post show better, and B, get more buy-in and even people wanting to contribute and participate because
Yep.
now it feels a little bit more structured. So think
That's
about
great.
that. Yeah, when you're doing the post show.
Yep.
The other thing I will tell you, and this is not meant to be a discouragement at all, is do not think that doing post shows because you've done the show multiple times is somehow going to get easier, smaller, and
No.
less information. I promise you.
No.
As, as you get better at these, you will go through a curve where you're actually going to start to see more and have
Yeah.
more learnings from the show. So just be encouraged to know you're going to continue to get better, but that post show is going to continue to be as big as it is.
Yes. And be ready to learn how to take feedback well and to
Oh,
not take it personally. You can execute an amazing show and still get a lot of critical post-show feedback. And those can both be okay.
yes. No, sadly, as supply chain marketing professionals know, opinions are like elbows. Everyone has a couple of
Yeah.
them. So just remember that.
Yep.
Okay, if your trade show isn't generating real pipeline or closing deals, why are you still going?
Probably because you have FOMO. So I think it's a question that's hard to ask ourselves. And often that little voice in our head that just says, we've done it in the past. So we're obviously just going to do it again. It can be hard to ignore that little voice. So I think it's just making sure that you're going into every show commitment with a clear understanding of why you're going, who is going that can buy what you're selling, and what is the goal? What's the outcome that we're driving at? And if you're always asking yourself those questions and being honest about it, then it might mean you don't go to some shows every year. It might mean you go to a few different shows or you switch it up. Like I think it's okay to have that conversation, talk those things out and maybe change direction.
Yeah, no, I mean, why not qualify the show, right? I
Right.
mean, if you're doing what Kaylin's talking about and you've done this step by step and you feel like you've done a successful show, the show should tell you whether or not you should continue to go, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the business should tell you.
But
So
it's hard
it
because
is hard.
other leaders in the business even feel that FOMO. So even if you've been diligent about it, you're still going to get the message from the SVP of sales or even the CEO that says, so and so was at the show. Why weren't we there? Why didn't we attend? So,
Right. That's a good point. And again, you're bringing in that human emotion element that
yep.
is very real in what we do in the marketing side of the business. No doubt about it. All right. So let's do this. Let's bring in the audience. So again, if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A section. We're going to get to as many of those as we can. If we don't get to you live, please know we will get back to you because we know it's important and we do want to continue to communicate with you. So, what I know about trade shows is showing up isn't a strategy. So, here's the first question from the audience. I've never done this before. What's the very first thing I should do when planning a show?
Start at the end. Decide what you want to get out of it and work backwards. It will answer the question of whether you should even go, which is what we just talked about, but also tell you all of the key things to think about and how to think about them along the way.
Wow, no, I love that. And look, for those of you who may have had the privilege of reading Stephen Covey's Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, you'll remember begin with the end in mind as one of those seven habits. And that is true in business, that's true in life, and that's definitely true with trade shows. So that is huge advice. I must be a nerd because I'm getting chills just thinking about that, right? So really, you got to think about what that is, paint it out. I mentor young folks on a pretty regular basis, and one of the things we talk about all the time is, it's a year from now. I need you to paint me the picture of where you are professionally, personally, physically, financially, psychologically. I mean, all these different spokes, I call them, on the wheel. And what I always tell them is, if you can't paint the picture, no one can see it, including you.
Yep.
Right. And so if you can't paint the picture of what this trade show is doing for you, no one can see it, even you. So I really, really like that one. All right. Next question from the audience. How do I decide? You talked about this a little earlier. How do I decide which shows are worth the money and which ones to skip?
It's tough. Obviously, the people running shows are also great sellers. And you'll see peers going to different shows. So I think, same, keep going back to, are your buyers attending the show? Is the right level of persona for the companies that you're targeting attending the show? And then again, just big picture, keep zooming out. How does it fit into your year? And, how does that serve you in terms of what you need for pipeline and orders? So keep zooming out to the bigger story for the year and how the event fits in that or not.
Yeah, let me tag this question on to that one. So, former U.S. Navy submarines. So, I use military as metaphors as well, and one of them is a periscope. So, with a periscope, you have the horizontal axis and you have the vertical axis, and you want your target right in the middle of that, right? So, what would you say to somebody as it relates to, hey, I'm looking at shows. What should I be thinking of, especially the supply chain automation marketer?
Yep.
What should I be thinking of in this horizontal axis and vertical axis? And you don't necessarily have to name shows, but what should they be thinking about if they're looking at trying to get something right in their target?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, the big things to consider are how much money do you have to spend? Because the bigger the show, the bigger the spend. So it's first thinking about the quantity of shows and then the audience. So a ProMat or a Modex is kind of going to be everybody's there. So
Right.
that's great, but that means that you're going to have to be on point to stand out at a show that size. And again, that equals money. So, do you want to start at a smaller show where maybe you aren't competing against as much noise? Maybe that has, a subset or a vertical that you're going to go deep on. So, I think just balancing out what are your priorities relative to your budget is probably an important consideration.
Cool. And that is a perfect segue into the next audience question, which is what does a quote good trade show outcome actually look like if you're just starting out or you're starting this process that you're talking about?
So if you can't confidently cover the cost as the bare minimum, but ideally return like a 5 or 7 to 1 spend on your
Ooh.
trade show, it's probably a bad use of money.
Okay, so that, yeah, no, that's wonderful. So Supply Chain Brain Media has a show called the Supply Chain Marketing Show. And we had a gentleman, Andrew Davis. He's a really world-renowned marketing person. And he says the same thing. He's like, look, if you don't have a metric of, something X of the show cost,
Yep.
then you have all you need to
Right.
figure out whether that's working or not, right?
Yep.
I mean, look, sometimes we don't like the answers that are just too simple, right?
Yeah. And if you're
That's
starting out and you don't know that, set a benchmark, but be
yeah,
ready to measure it and understand it, and then look at everything else through that lens moving forward.
right. No, I love that. I love that. Okay, next question. So I know we need a booth, but what else do I need to plan around it to make the most of the investment? This is a really good question.
The booth is an important part when you kind of think about the show as a marketer, but it's kind of one of the last things that matters when you're approaching trade shows. So I think you really need to just think really critically about the goal and then the message that supports that goal and the booth and all of the kind of supporting assets for the show should flow naturally from that. So everyone thinks to start with the booth and the booth design, but I think that's actually just a derivative of more important decisions you're making earlier on.
Right. And just give the folks a little bit of encouragement because like anything else, when you start something, it's the most painful, it's the heaviest lift.
Yep.
You're talking about, the whole levels of change, you're talking about habits, right? Things we've talked about already in this webinar. Give them a little bit of encouragement. I mean, how long have you been doing what you're doing at BG, and then kind of what has been the time frame for your path, just to start to give them some encouragement for what was possible for them.
Yeah, I think just don't be discouraged. Ralph and I are, giving this advice based on things that we've learned and done wrong in the past. Um, and it's just like on your wedding day, right? Like you're the only one who's really going to know if 99% of it went wrong. So I think just understand why you're going, execute to the best of your abilities, be honest about what worked and didn't, and then you just learn every year. I don't think I've ever executed what I would say is like a perfect show. Tons of things go wrong. We learn tons of things. But I think it's just that I hope that I never think it's perfect. So I hope I'm always willing to learn and be a sponge and, talk to other people and get new ideas. So just be okay as long as you set out with good goals and good intentions and
Yeah,
execute on
no,
it.
man, I couldn't agree more. So overused metaphor alert again. So I wish every supply chain marketing professional could be in the meetings after an NFL game is over. I had the pleasure of working in NFL entertainment for 6 years, and even though I wasn't part of the operations, you are kind of exposed to a lot of what's going on. And I will assure you that these professional athletes, these professional coaches, when they get together after the game, they could have won 40 to nothing. They still talk about the things they could improve on at
Yep.
the game. It's amazing, actually. So, again, I know it's easy to understand when you're talking about sports or especially professional sports, but here's what I'm going to tell you, and I mean this sincerely. There is no reason why we can't be just as much of pros as they are. Right. And so I think that's what Kaylin's trying to encourage you and trying to give you the instructions are, in just a few short cycles, show cycles, you can get to a point where people look at you like the pro, like, you have, regardless of how well that show went, there are places you could improve on. And so as you do that, it's you and they simply get better and better. All
Yep.
right. So here's another great question. How do I get sales? I call it the three-legged approach. How do I get sales, executives, and marketing aligned so this doesn't fall squarely on the supply chain marketing professional?
Yeah. So I think it just comes with, again, the end goal. So
Hmm.
if any salesperson is wired to money, and any executive, most executives, maybe any, is also wired to money. So if you can all align on what are you going to get out of this individually, and tie them to getting that thing that at the end of the day will probably equal money if you've all done it well, then everyone has some skin in the game. And it's not just a marketing trade show. It's they have a clear understanding of, if I do A, I will get B, and B is money. So I think it's just when you start there and it sounds scary, it's actually the thing that's going to make your job so much easier, because they all want to hit their quota and the company wants to hit their orders and their revenue number. So if you show them how this is going to do that and the steps that they need to take in order for that to happen, it's there isn't fight. There's no need to push alignment or force this on anybody. They get it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I have to plug the supply chain marketing show that Supply Chain Brain Media does one more time. They had a guest on, her name's Pam Didner. Pam is in like the top 10 professional presenters in marketing, and her specialty is bringing marketing and sales together for initiatives. And that's also a neat interview for somebody watching or listening to this to go see, because that is important, what Kaylin's talking about at the end of the day. And look, folks, what we're really talking about is we're really talking about taking us as supply chain marketing professionals from event planning and being, this, liability, or, this investment that people aren't looking at like it's, building the business. So it's almost a liability to really an asset. When you start doing these shows that Kaylin is telling you about, the way she's telling you to do it, and you start generating real revenue and business starts growing as a result of this, I promise you your wealth in that company is going to go up,
Yep.
and your wealth in the industry is going to go up. I'm just saying. So you want to think about that. All right, listen, we're almost out of time. As you know, in preparing for this show, we could talk about this for a while, but the audience has things to do. So here's my final question to you. Uh, what is it that somebody who's now encouraged, excited, eager to get going. Like, hey, this is great. I love this. And it's nice to know we've got a cohort out there that is working together to make us better. What is it they should be remembering? Like, crystallize what they should remember from what we've talked about for the last hour. And then what is it that they should do right now?
My final message for anyone listening would be to fall in love with a revenue number. Don't be scared of it. Own it, embrace it, and shift from just making noise to making money.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, I'm a huge fan of taglines. So I really appreciate you giving us one. I mean, shifting from just making noise to making money. I mean, again, folks, that's true at trade shows. That's true now online. That's true with your message. That's why what Kaylin was talking about with putting these things that are on these rings together with branding and content development and online earned media, creating lead gen. One of the things, Caitlin, I tell our audience all the time, our job as supply chain marketing professionals is to be knocking on doors to get business, right? I mean, that's what we do. Well,
Yep.
how about instead of knocking on doors, they're knocking on yours?
Right.
Right? That's what we're trying to do here. So with that, I just want to say thank you for your time, for your expertise, for just caring, to be honest with you. I mean, the fact that you taken the time to prepare for this show, produce this show with me, that says just so much about you and what you're giving back to the industry. So I can't thank you enough for what you're doing. Appreciate your help and your input. Any parting thoughts?
No, I'm excited to continue to learn from others. So also appreciate the time.
Yeah, no, again, it's one of those things where we can't tell them enough, shifting from making noise to making money. We want to be the theme of what you get out of today. So please remember that and let us know. So with that, thank you again. We appreciate you. We wish you all great success and hope that the next 12 months in trade show preparing, executing, and post-show management is your best year ever.